In a distant corner of the universe, the Galactic Empire reigned supreme. Its hunters were renowned across the stars for their skill and bravery in tracking down the most fearsome prey. They had faced the acid-spitting Vorgons of Zeta Prime, wrestled with the mind-controlling Krakens of Nebula X, and even brought down a Titanosaurus Rex on the lost world of Gaia. No beast was too mighty, no monster too terrifying for these intrepid hunters. One day, a new target caught their attention: Earth. This small, unassuming planet on the edge of the Milky Way had long been overlooked by the Galactic Empire. But recent reports suggested that Earth was home to a variety of unique and potentially challenging predators. Intrigued, the Empire dispatched its finest hunting crew to investigate. The hunter's ship sliced through the void of space, its sleek, silver hull glinting in the starlight. On board, the crew prepared for their mission with barely contained excitement. They were led by Captain Zog, a grizzled veteran with a cybernetic eye and a scar-crossed face. His second in command was a lithe blue-skinned alien named Xara, who wielded a plasma rifle with deadly precision. Rounding out the team were the hulking reptilian twins, Grok and Dron, masters of hand-to-hand combat. As their ship approached Earth, the hunters gathered in the central holocamber to review their intel. Hovering before them were holographic projections of Earth's apex predators: lions, tigers, bears, and wolves. The hunters studied these creatures with a mix of amusement and disdain. "Look at these primitives," scoffed Zog, poking a finger through the holographic lion's mane. "They don't even have natural armor or energy weapons. How can they call themselves predators?" Xara nodded in agreement, her electric blue eyes narrowing. "I've seen scarier things in my breakfast cereal. This will be like shooting fish in a barrel." Grok and Dron chuckled, their laughter rumbling through the chamber like distant thunder. They flexed their massive, scaly arms, eager to test their strength against Earth's beasts. The ship soon entered Earth's atmosphere, gliding silently over the planet's surface. They had chosen to land in a remote forest, far from any human settlements. As the gangplank lowered and the hunters stepped out onto the alien soil, they paused to survey their new hunting grounds. Towering trees stretched up to the sky, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. Strange bird calls echoed through the woods, and small, furry creatures skittered through the underbrush. To the Galactic Empire hunters, it seemed like a tame, even cute little world. "All right, team," said Zog, unholstering his plasma pistol. "Let's set up camp and get ready for some target practice. I want to bag one of each of those Earth predators for my trophy room." The others grinned and set to work, unloading their equipment from the ship. They set up a perimeter of force field generators to keep out any curious humans, then deploy their hover tents and portable armory. Within minutes, they had transformed the clearing into a high-tech hunter's paradise. As the sun began to set over the forest, the hunters gathered around a floating bonfire, swapping stories of past hunts and speculating on what challenges Earth might offer. They drank synthesized ale and roasted genetically engineered meat on plasma spits, their laughter ringing out into the night. Little did they know that deep in the forest, a pair of eyes watched them from the shadows. Eyes that belonged to a creature unlike any they had ever faced before. A creature that would soon teach these arrogant aliens the true meaning of the word predator. For on Earth, there was one beast that even the Galactic Empire's greatest hunters would learn to fear: the Wolverine. The Galactic Empire hunters awoke to a misty morning, the sun's first rays filtering through the dense canopy overhead. They emerged from their hover tents, stretching and yawning, ready for their first day of hunting on Earth. Captain Zog surveyed the campsite with a critical eye, ensuring that everything was in order. The force field generators hummed softly, creating an invisible barrier around the perimeter. The weapons rack was fully stocked, gleaming with an array of high-tech firearms and energy blades. "All right, listen up," Zog barked, gathering his team around the central holotable. "Today, we're going after Earth's apex predators. Lions, tigers, bears, the whole lot. We'll split into 2 teams, cover more ground that way. Sara, you're with me. Grok, Drawn, you two stick together. We'll maintain comlink at all times and rendezvous back here at sundown. Any questions? The hunters shook their heads, eager to begin the hunt. Good. Let's move out. They set off into the forest, their boots crunching on the fallen leaves and twigs. Zog and Sara headed east, towards a nearby mountain range where their scans had detected a high concentration of large mammalian life forms. Grok and Drawn lumbered west, down towards a winding river valley. As they hiked through the undergrowth, the hunters couldn't help but marvel at the strange beauty of Earth's wilderness. The trees were unlike anything they had seen before, with rough brown bark and delicate green leaves. The air was rich with unfamiliar scents: damp soil, decaying vegetation, the musky odor of animal life. But the hunters weren't here to admire the scenery. They were here for the thrill of the hunt, to pit their skills against the most fearsome creatures this planet had to offer. Zog and Sara trekked up the mountainside, their enhanced senses alert for any sign of their quarry. They moved with the fluid grace of predators themselves, their movements precise and silent. Suddenly, Sara held up a hand, signaling for Zog to stop. There, she whispered, pointing to a rocky outcropping up ahead. I'm picking up a heat signature, something big. Zog nodded, a slow grin spreading across his face. He unslung his plasma rifle, checking the charge. Let's go introduce ourselves. They crept forward, hugging the shadows, until they had a clear view of the outcropping. There, basking in a patch of sunlight, lay a massive tawny shape. It was a mountain lion, its powerful muscles rippling beneath its sleek fur as it dozed. Sara aimed her rifle, lining up the perfect shot, but just as her finger tightened on the trigger, Zog placed a hand on her arm. Wait, he said softly. Where's the sport in that? I want to take it down up close and personal. Sara rolled her eyes but lowered her weapon. She knew better than to argue with Zog when he got that gleam in his eye. Zog unsheathed his vibro blade, a wicked-looking hunting knife that pulsed with ultrasonic energy. He began to stalk towards the sleeping mountain lion, his footsteps measured and deliberate. But he had underestimated the creature's senses. The mountain lion's eyes snapped open, and it leaped to its feet with a snarl. Zog barely had time to react before the big cat was upon him, a whirlwind of claws and fangs. The two predators clashed, their bodies a tangle of thrashing limbs and snapping jaws. Though Zog was strong and well-armed, the mountain lion's raw primal ferocity was a match for his skills. The creature raked its claws across his face, leaving behind trails of electric blue blood. Just as it seemed Zog would be overwhelmed, Sara lined up her shot and took it. A bolt of plasma struck the mountain lion in the flank, sending it tumbling to the ground with a pained roar. Zog staggered back, nursing his wounds. The mountain lion lay dead at his feet, its once magnificent coat smoking and charred around Sara's precise shot. The hunt had begun. As Zog and Sara regrouped after their encounter with the mountain lion, Grok and Drawn were having their own adventure down by the river. The two reptilian brothers had tracked a large, lumbering beast to the water's edge, where it was drinking from the clear, rushing stream. It was a bear, a massive, shaggy creature with gleaming black fur and powerful, razor-sharp claws. Grok and Drawn exchanged a glance, their yellow eyes glinting with anticipation. Dibs on the pelt, Grok rumbled, hefting his plasma cannon. Drawn snorted, unsheathing his electro-whip. Fine, I call the meat. They approached the bear from downwind, using the trees and boulders for cover. The creature was oblivious to their presence, too focused on its drink to notice the danger creeping up behind it. When they were close enough, Grok let out a bellowing war cry and charged, his cannon blazing. The bear reared up on its hind legs, roaring in surprise and pain as the plasma bolts seared its hide. Drawn was right behind his brother, his electro-whip crackling with energy. He lashed out at the bear's legs, the whip coiling around its ankles and sending jolts of electricity coursing through its body. The bear thrashed and flailed, its strength and fury a sight to behold. But it was no match for the hunter's advanced weapons and tactics. Gruck's cannon blasts tore through its flesh, while Dron's whip kept it off balance and in constant agony. In a matter of minutes, the once mighty bear lay dead at their feet, its body smoking and twitching. Gruck and Dron roared in triumph, their voices echoing through the valley. Meanwhile, back at the campsite, Zog and Sara were tending to their wounds and admiring their latest kill. The mountain lion's corpse hung from a nearby tree, suspended by a gravity beam for easier skinning and processing. Zog ran a hand over the creature's tawny flank, marveling at the softness of its fur. "You know, I almost feel bad for these earth beasts," he mused. "They never stood a chance against us." Sara shrugged, applying a healing salve to the gashes on Zog's face. "That's the price of being primitive. When you don't evolve, you get left behind." Just then, Gruck and Dron came stomping into the camp, dragging the bear's carcass behind them. They were covered in blood and grinning from ear to ear. "Look what we bagged," Dron crowed, dumping the bear at Zog's feet. "Biggest damn thing I've ever seen." Zog whistled appreciatively, eyeing the bear's immense size and vicious claws. "Impressive. But I bet it still wasn't as tough as my mountain lion." The hunters laughed and set about skinning and butchering their kills, preparing the choicest cuts of meat for their evening meal. As they worked, they swapped stories of their hunts, each trying to outdo the others with tales of their prowess and bravery. But their revelry was interrupted by a sudden, sharp voice from the edge of the camp. "You folks ain't from around here, are you?" The hunters spun around, weapons at the ready. Standing just outside the force field was a grizzled, wiry man in a battered hat and worn fatigues. He had a rifle slung over his shoulder and a knowing look in his eye. Zog stepped forward, his hand on his holstered plasma pistol. "Who are you?" he demanded. The man tipped his hat, a wry smile playing on his weathered face. "Name's Jack. I'm what you might call a local expert on these parts, and I couldn't help but overhear you folks bragging about your little hunting expedition." Sara scoffed, tossing a mountain lion bone aside. "What of it, old man? We're just having a bit of sport." Jack shook his head, his smile fading. "You folks don't know what you're messing with. These woods, they got things in them that ain't to be trifled with. Things that'll make your fancy guns and gadgets look like kids' toys." The hunters exchanged skeptical glances, but Jack pressed on. "You think you're hot stuff, 'cause you took down a couple of bears and cougars. Those are just the appetizers around here. The real king of these woods, he's something else entirely. And if you're not careful, he'll be the one hunting you." Zog stepped closer to the force field, his cybernetic eye whirring as it scanned Jack for any signs of deception. "And what, pray tell, is this king of yours?" Jack's smile returned, but this time it was cold and humorless. "The Wolverine," he said simply. "And trust me, you don't want to meet him." With that, Jack turned and walked back into the forest, leaving the hunters to ponder his ominous warning. Despite Jack's warning, the Galactic Empire hunters were undeterred in their quest for the ultimate trophy. They spent the next few days stalking the forest, taking down any predator that crossed their path. Bears, wolves, cougars, none could stand against their advanced weapons and tactics. But as they delved deeper into the wilderness, they began to notice something strange. The animals they hunted seemed to be getting smarter, more elusive. It was as if they were adapting to the hunter's presence, learning to avoid their traps and ambushes. Zog refused to be discouraged. He was determined to bag the biggest, baddest beast Earth had to offer, and he wouldn't rest until he had its head mounted on his wall. One morning, as the hunters were breaking camp, Sara spotted something odd on the edge of the force field. It was a small, furry creature, about the size of a dog, with a bushy tail and a curious, almost intelligent expression on its face. "Hey, Zog," she called out. "Come check this out." Zog ambled over, squinting at the creature through the shimmering barrier. "What is that? Some kind of rodent?" Sarah consulted her wrist-mounted computer, scrolling through the database of Earth's fauna. "It's called a Wolverine," she said after a moment. "Apparently, they're known for their ferocity and tenacity, despite their small size." Zog snorted, unimpressed. "Ferocious, that little thing. I've seen scarier-looking creatures in a petting zoo." Grok and Drawn lumbered over, eager to see what the fuss was about. They too laughed when they saw the diminutive Wolverine, its beady eyes watching them with what almost looked like amusement. "Hey, I've got an idea," Drawn said, a mischievous grin spreading across his scaly face. "Why don't we let the little guy in and have some fun with him? We could use a live target to practice our aim." Zog hesitated for a moment, remembering Jack's warning. But his pride and arrogance quickly won out. What could this tiny creature possibly do to them, the greatest hunters in the galaxy? "All right," he said, deactivating the force field with a flick of his wrist. "But make it quick. We've got bigger game to hunt." The Wolverine didn't seem to appreciate the hunter's hospitality. As soon as the force field dropped, it darted into the camp, moving with surprising speed and agility. The hunters tried to track it with their weapons, but it was too quick, too nimble. It wove between their legs, nipping at their ankles and darting away before they could react. Grok yelped in pain as the Wolverine's sharp teeth sank into his calf, drawing blood. "Why, you little..." He swung his plasma cannon around, trying to get a bead on the furry blur, but the Wolverine was already gone, scampering up a nearby tree with effortless grace. The hunters quickly found themselves on the defensive, trying to fend off the Wolverine's lightning-fast attacks. It seemed to be everywhere at once, striking from the shadows and then vanishing like a ghost. Zara managed to wing it with a blast from her rifle, singing its fur. But the Wolverine barely seemed to notice, launching itself at her face with a snarl of rage. She screamed, trying to pry it off, but its jaws were locked tight. Zog finally managed to snatch the Wolverine by the scruff of its neck, hurling it away from Sarah. It hit the ground hard, rolling to its feet with a growl. For a moment, the hunters and the Wolverine faced each other, panting and bleeding. The Wolverine's eyes gleamed with a feral, almost intelligent light, as if it knew exactly what it was doing. Then, with a final defiant snarl, the Wolverine turned and bounded away into the undergrowth, leaving the hunters stunned and shaken. Zog stared after it, his cybernetic eye whirring as it tried to track the creature's heat signature. But it was no use. The Wolverine had vanished, as if it had never been there at all. What the hell was that? Sarah gasped, nursing her wounded face. Zog didn't answer. He was too busy replaying Jack's warning in his mind, a cold feeling of dread settling in the pit of his stomach. They had underestimated the Wolverine, and it had made them pay. Suddenly, the idea of being the hunter didn't seem quite so appealing anymore. The hunters were licking their wounds, their pride as battered as their bodies. The Wolverine's attack had caught them completely off guard, and they were struggling to come to terms with the fact that such a small creature could pose such a big threat. Zog paced back and forth, his cybernetic eye glowing a furious red. "This is unacceptable," he growled. "We are the greatest hunters in the galaxy. We will not be bested by some furred rat." Zara, her face now adorned with a jagged scar courtesy of the Wolverine's claws, nodded in agreement. "We need to take it down, Zog. We can't let it make a mockery of us." Grok and Drawn, usually so boisterous and eager for a fight, were uncharacteristically subdued. They had underestimated the Wolverine once, and they had the bite marks to prove it. But Zog's determination was infectious. He rallied his team, formulating a plan to track down and eliminate the Wolverine once and for all. They would use all their skills, all their technology, to hunt the creature to the ends of the earth if necessary. Little did they know, the Wolverine had plans of its own. That night, as the hunters slept in their hover tents, the Wolverine crept into their camp. It moved silently, its paws barely disturbing the fallen leaves and twigs. With methodical precision, it began to sabotage the hunters' equipment. It gnawed through the power cables of their force field generators, rendering them useless. It clawed at the delicate circuitry of their weapons, causing them to short out and malfunction. By the time the hunters awoke, their camp was in chaos. Their equipment was in shambles, their defenses compromised. And in the midst of it all, the Wolverine sat perched on a rock, watching them with an almost smug expression on its furry face. Zog was beside himself with rage. He grabbed his plasma rifle, determined to end the creature once and for all. But when he pulled the trigger, the weapon only emitted a pathetic clicking sound. The Wolverine had disabled it, along with all their other high-tech gear. Undeterred, Zog drew his vibro blade and charged at the Wolverine with a roar of fury. But the creature was too quick, darting out of the way and raking its claws across Zog's back as it passed. Grok and Drawn tried to join the fray, but they found themselves tripping over the tangled remains of their equipment. Sarah, her depth perception thrown off by her injured eye, couldn't seem to land a hit on the nimble creature. The Wolverine, meanwhile, seemed to be enjoying itself. It danced around the hunters, striking at them with lightning-fast jabs and slashes. It was like it was toying with them, reveling in their frustration and anger. Finally, with a final, contemptuous snort, the Wolverine bounded away into the underbrush. The hunters were left to survey the wreckage of their camp, their bodies bruised and their egos in tatters. Zog slammed his fist into a nearby tree, his face contorted with rage. "This isn't over," he snarled. "That creature has made an enemy today. We will hunt it down, no matter how long it takes." Zara and the others nodded, their determination renewed by their leader's words. They would not rest until they had the Wolverine's pelt as a trophy. But deep in the forest, the Wolverine was already planning its next move. It had proven itself more than a match for the hunters, and it would not rest until they were driven from its territory. The stage was set for a final, brutal confrontation between the most advanced hunters in the galaxy and one of Earth's most tenacious and cunning predators. Only one could emerge victorious, and the Wolverine was determined to make sure it was the one left standing. The hunters, their equipment repaired and their resolve hardened, set out to track down the Wolverine. They moved through the forest with grim determination, their eyes scanning the undergrowth for any sign of their elusive prey. Zog led the way, his vibro blade clutched tightly in his hand. He had sworn a blood oath to take down the Wolverine, and he would not rest until he had fulfilled that vow. For days, they searched, following the faint tracks and traces left by the Wolverine. It seemed to always be one step ahead of them, vanishing into the wilderness just as they closed in. But finally, on a misty morning, they found themselves standing at the mouth of a small cave, tucked away in a hillside. The tracks led inside, and the hunters knew they had found the Wolverine's den. "This is it," Zog said, his voice a low growl. "We end this, here and now." They entered the cave, their weapons at the ready. The darkness was oppressive, broken only by the faint glow of their helmet lights. And then, from out of the shadows, the Wolverine attacked. It was a whirlwind of fur and fangs, striking from all sides. The hunters fired their weapons, but the Wolverine was too quick, too agile. It dodged their shots and slashed at their armor with its razor-sharp claws. Grok went down first, the Wolverine's jaws clamped around his throat. Drawn tried to come to his brother's aid, but the Wolverine was on him in an instant, ripping and tearing. Sarah managed to land a glancing blow with her rifle, but the Wolverine barely seemed to feel it. It turned on her, its eyes glinting with savage fury. Zog found himself face to face with the creature, his vibro blade locked against its claws. They strained against each other, man and beast, in a battle of raw strength and primal ferocity. For a moment, it seemed as if Zog would prevail. His cybernetic enhancements gave him an edge, allowing him to slowly push the Wolverine back. But then, with a sudden twist, the Wolverine broke free. It lunged at Zog, its teeth sinking into his arm. Zog roared in pain, his grip on his blade faltering. The Wolverine pressed its advantage, driving Zog back. The hunter stumbled, his footing unsure on the uneven ground of the cave. And then, with a final powerful lunge, the Wolverine knocked Zog off his feet. The hunter went down, his head cracking against a rock with a sickening thud. The Wolverine stood over him, its chest heaving with exertion. Its fur was matted with blood, but it seemed to barely notice its own wounds. For a moment, the two adversaries stared at each other, a strange sort of understanding passing between them. They were both predators, both warriors in their own way. But only one could be the victor. With a final, almost respectful nod, the Wolverine turned and limped away into the depths of the cave, leaving the broken and battered hunters behind. Zog, his consciousness fading, could only watch it go. In that moment, he realized the true folly of their arrogance. They had come to this world seeking to prove their superiority. But in the end, they had been humbled by a creature they had dismissed as weak and insignificant. As darkness claimed him, Zog's last thought was a silent acknowledgement of the Wolverine's strength and courage. They had been bested, not by technology or firepower, but by the indomitable spirit of Earth's greatest predator. The Wolverine, for its part, retreated deep into its den. It was wounded, exhausted, but it was alive. And it knew, with the certainty of a true survivor, that it had defended its territory and its way of life against the most formidable foe it had ever faced. In the end, the hunt belonged to the Wolverine, and Earth remained unconquered by the forces of the Galactic Empire. The hunters had learned a costly lesson, one they would not soon forget. Never underestimate the power of the natural world, for it is a force that even the most advanced civilization ignores at its peril. Days later, the battered and bruised hunters limped back to their ship. They had barely managed to drag themselves out of the Wolverine's den, their pride as wounded as their bodies. Zog, his arm wrapped in a makeshift splint, sat heavily in the pilot's chair. He stared out at the forest, a newfound respect and understanding in his eyes. "We were fools," he said softly. "We thought ourselves the apex predators of the galaxy, but we were nothing compared to the beasts of this world." Sarah, her face scared and her spirit humbled, nodded in agreement. "We underestimated them," she said. "We thought our technology and our training made us invincible, but the Wolverine taught us otherwise." Grok and Dron, their usual bravado conspicuously absent, could only grunt in assent. They had been changed by their encounter with the Wolverine, both physically and mentally. As they prepared to depart, a figure emerged from the tree line. It was Jack, the old hunter who had warned them of the Wolverine's ferocity. He walked up to their ship, a knowing smile on his weathered face. "I see you met our little friend," he said, his tone almost amused. Zog looked at him, a newfound respect in his eyes. "You tried to warn us," he said. "We should have listened." Jack shrugged. "Some lessons can only be learned the hard way," he said. "But I reckon you folks won't be underestimating Earth's critters anytime soon." With that, he turned and walked back into the forest, whistling a tune. The hunters watched him go, a newfound appreciation for the man and his world. As they took off, the ship's engines roaring to life, Zog found himself lost in thought. He had come to Earth seeking glory and trophies, but he had found something far more valuable. He had found humility. He had found respect for the natural world and all its wonders. And he had found a new understanding of his place in the universe. The ship rose into the sky, leaving the forest behind. But the hunters knew they would carry the memory of their time on Earth with them forever. As they broke through the atmosphere and into the void of space, Zog looked back at the blue and green orb receding behind them. He thought of the Wolverine, of its strength and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. And he smiled, a small, rueful smile. "Until we meet again, little one," he murmured. "Until we meet again." Light years away on the forest floor, the Wolverine raised its head. Its wounds were healing, its strength returning, and in its eyes there was a glint of something almost like satisfaction. It had defended its home, its way of life. It had proven itself the true apex predator of its world, And it knew, with the certainty of a creature born to the wild, that it would always be ready to do so again. For that was the way of the Wolverine, and the way of all Earth's creatures. They would endure, as they always had, long after the hunters and their ilk had faded into memory. And the forest would remain, a testament to the indomitable spirit of life in all its forms. A reminder that, in the end, it is not technology or firepower that rules the universe, but the courage and tenacity of those who call it home. The Wolverine turned and vanished into the undergrowth, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. And the forest, ancient and eternal, closed around it like a protective embrace, sheltering it as it had always done, and always would.